We celebrate the life of really a force on the foreign stage, the life of Madeleine Albright, the first woman to become U.S. Secretary of State and a force in global affairs, died yesterday. President Biden said Secretary Albright was a, quote, a force for goodness, grace, and decency, and for freedom. Hers were the hands that turned the tide of history. She was that, and so much more.
Before watching the rest of the tribute and video, this short intro might be useful. Born and named Marie Jana Korbel, was the daughter of a Czech diplomat. After the Nazis occupied Czechoslovakia in 1939, her family fled to England. Although she spent most of her life believing that they had fled for political reasons, she learned in 1997 that her family was Jewish and that 3 of her grandparents had died in German concentration camps. The family returned to Czechoslovakia after World War II, but the Soviet-sponsored communist coup made them refugees again, and by 1948 they had settled in the United States. Fast forward growing up in the U.S. and becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen at age 20, and eventually Madeleine Jana Korbel Albright became an American diplomat who served as the 64th United States Secretary of State from 1997 to 2001 under President Bill Clinton.
At a time when the world faces a transatlantic crisis, we lost a giant in foreign policy. Madeleine Albright was the first female Secretary of State in American history, and her legacy does not stop there. Born in Prague, Marie Jana Madlenka Korbelova in 1937, it is her father who may have lit the spark in her brilliant mind, serving as a member of the Czechoslovak Foreign Service and as press attaché in Belgrade, and then later, ambassador to Yugoslavia. After Czech communists with Soviet support overthrew the government of Czechoslovakia in 1948, the family immigrated to America, where Madlenka, then age 11, became Madeleine. At the age of 20, Madeleine Albright became a U.S. citizen in 1957 and would earn a degree in political science with honors from Wellesley College in 1959. She would go on to earn a Ph.D. in public law and government from Columbia, where she studied under another fellow refugee from Poland, my father, Zbigniew Brzezinski. In 1976, she worked for Senator Edmund Muskie of Maine, and 2 years later found herself in a windowless cubbyhole in the West Wing as a staffer in the White House, brought there by my father, then National Security Advisor for President Jimmy Carter. He brought her in for her knowledge, her skills, and her ability to bluntly tell him what he needed to hear.
He did more than anyone, apart from my father, to shape my view of the world and my understanding of foreign policy through a relationship that spanned 6 decades.
With their similar backgrounds and shared ideals, my father and mother and Madeleine quickly became the closest of friends. From that point on, our families would be intertwined forever. From the West Wing, Dr. Albright would go on to Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service as director of its Women in Foreign Service program. Then, in 1993, she was appointed ambassador to the United Nations by President Bill Clinton. On December 5, 1996, Madeleine Korbel Albright was nominated to be the 64th and first woman Secretary of State by President Clinton.
I, Madeleine Korbel Albright,
confirmed just over a month later in the U.S. Senate with a vote of 99-0. She served in the position for 4 years. A transatlantic groundbreaker, Albright promoted the expansion of NATO eastward into former Soviet bloc nations, supported the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons from the former Soviet republics to rogue nations, and championed America's alliances. She successfully pressed for NATO to intervene militarily during the humanitarian crisis in Kosovo in 1999, furthered the normalization of relations with Vietnam, and favored the ratification of the Kyoto Protocol on global climate change. She tirelessly and fiercely advocated for democracy and human rights. In 2012, Dr. Albright received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor from President Barack Obama.
Once at a naturalization ceremony, an Ethiopian man came up to her and said, "Only in America can a refugee meet the Secretary of State." And she replied, "Only in America can a refugee become the Secretary of State."
She never forgot young Madlenka, a child war refugee who, along with her family, was forced by the Nazis to flee her homeland, came to America, where democracy, rule of law, and peace enabled her talents to be leveraged at the highest levels of public service. She never took freedom for granted.
The great lesson of this century is that when aggression and brutality go unopposed, like a cancer they spread, and what begins as a treatable sickness in one part of the body can rapidly endanger the whole.
Albright's life and legacy is testimony to what is at stake in Europe today. The accession of Central European democracies into NATO, where they not only flourish but add value to the community of democracies, and that finds itself under threat today. Her passing should inspire us all to recognize what is once again at stake in Europe and the world. I will miss her deeply. I've known Dr. Albright since I was a little girl. She tried to get me to call her Madeline in later years. It never worked.
From what has been reported, Mika has decided to take Joe's name. As a former student and devoted colleague of her father's, I don't understand why she would do this, because Scarborough is so hard to spell.
She had a quick wit, a loving heart, and a knowledge that cut deep about the preciousness of freedom. She did not suffer fools, and as loving and supportive as she was to me growing up, it was how fiercely protective she was of freedom. That's what I'll always remember about Madeleine Albright.